and they didn't look.
And they were very slow in getting off the ground, which is a difference between Enron, WorldCom, and this period. But it's time to get Mike up. Mike Norman is chief economist. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead. I'd like to hear you first.
No, I'm going alphabetically. Norman comes before Turner. I know that.
It's an updated, I think, the updated bio. I could do my bio off of here.
He's chief economist at John
I'm
Thomas.
no longer there, though.
No longer there.
No.
He was a great chief economist. Go
I'm
ahead, Mike.
I'll have it. How do I work this thing? Just this button. All right, good evening. I'll start. I want to thank Rohan for inviting me here. I got an email, I think it was back in September, out of the clear blue, somebody inviting me to speak at Columbia Law School. I was flabbergasted, to say the least. Very flattered. I wasn't sure how he found me. I think it was through my blog, and I think the connection with most of the speakers that have been in this series is the modern monetary theory. You know, Bill, teaching at UMKC, you've had people like Warren Mosler here, Stephanie Kelton, Randy Ray, Scott Fulwell. I think you know a lot of these people. And actually, I met, you know Warren Mosler? Any of you? I met him, I guess it's about 11 years now, in 2002. And just a little bit on my background, I have a degree in economics. I went to Penn undergrad. I went to UCLA to do graduate school in the late 70s. I didn't start out to do economics. I just kind of decided, after Penn, I decided to go out to California because I wanted to surf. And I got into UCLA easily. People were like, why are you leaving Penn to go to UCLA? And back then, it wasn't a highly rated academic school. It was a jock school. I just felt like going out to California. And actually, I wanted to get into the movies. I wanted to get into Hollywood. And I started to do some small films. I was in a couple of small films. And I was thinking, wow, life is great. And I had this little Italian sports car convertible. And one day I'm just sitting at a stoplight. It's a red light. Life is beautiful. I'm getting my start in Hollywood. And all of a sudden I hear a screech and a crash. And this car in the opposing lane, who was going to make a left turn, got rear-ended, sent this car careening into me broadside. I mean, my car was totaled. It's a miracle that I got out of that thing alive. And that was it. I mean, I was stuck in LA. I was a broke student. I had no money. I had no car, which if you're in LA without a car, that's death, even today, right? And I was like, now what am I going to do? My Hollywood dreams are dashed. So I thought, well, I guess I'll just go back to New York, and I guess I'll go work on Wall Street. And who knows, you know, so we never know the end of that, what the end of that story might have been. But you know what's funny? I always tell people, and I tell this to my kids and people that I meet, we always try to control every little detail of our lives, right? Like micromanage. But then something could come out of nowhere and completely change the course of your life, and you have no control over that whatsoever. You just have to go with it. So here I am today before you, the movie star that may have been, but the economist who is right now, modern monetary theory. So anyway, my background, last 34 years on Wall Street, started basically at Merrill Lynch. I'm a former member and trader on 4 different exchanges, futures exchanges, New York Futures Exchange, and NYMEX, COMEX, and Chicago Mercantile Exchange. I managed some money for Paul Tudor Jones for a while and Tudor Investment Corporation. I was a proprietary trader for Credit Suisse and Swiss Bank Corporation before Swiss Bank Corporation was bought by UBS. I lived in Switzerland actually for 10 years. I'm an economist, as I mentioned, activist, and seeker of the truth. Yes, yes. We're here today. This whole series, right, is, I changed the title a little bit. It's Modern Money and the Public Purpose, but I'm going to be talking mostly about my view from Wall Street as a trader for the last 34 years. So I called it Markets and the Public Purpose. And, you know, I got a little philosophical here because we have former regulators with us, great guys. And by the way, when Rohan told me that, you know, I was invited to come here, and he said Bill Black was on the panel, I thought I had to debate Bill Black. And I was like, no way, man, I'm not doing that. Not because I thought I'd do a bad job. I think I could have done a good job, but Bill Black, he's the man. I agree with everything he says. I didn't want to debate him, so I was almost ready to bow out of this thing. But like I said, we have regulators here, and I got a little bit philosophical here. You know, it's always good to take an idea to its logical extreme, right? Because you hear a lot, especially nowadays, regulation, it's killing the economy. And, you know, we're here trying to say that it was the relaxation or the stripping away of regulation that got us into this mess. And we have guys like Bill Black, you know, showing us that this is what happened. That is the truth. But there's a whole belief system out there that it was the regulators that are the problem. And we're regulating too much now, and we have to have this kind of very laissez-faire. And, you know, the most popular book out there now is what? You know, Atlas Shrugged, Fountainhead, Ayn Rand, right? How many of you are fans? Right? Good, good. So you take an idea and you take it to its logical extreme. Like, let's not have any regulation. Let's not have any government at all. Every man for himself. So that's why I'm a big fan of Thomas Hobbes, 16th century English philosopher, where he wrote in his seminal work, Leviathan, life without government would be a jungle state. In that state, each person would have a right or a license to everything, like these criminals in the banks, right? That's what they believe. That's what's happening, right? It's a jungle state. Hobbes argued that would lead to a war against all. And in such a state, people fear death and lack both the things necessary for a good life and the hope of being able to toil to obtain them. So in order to avoid it, what happens? People come together and they establish a social contract, a civil society. And to these people who preach Ayn Rand, I ask them all the time, show me one example, give me one example of a state or a nation that exists where everybody just does whatever they want. Okay? I mean, I'm a pretty big guy. I could go out there and take from a lot of people if I wanted to, and you don't have to be big. You could use a weapon, you could use a gun, right? But people, human beings, we don't want to live in a jungle state. So this is the great contradiction I find among these people who go out there and say, we don't need regulation. Regulation is ruining everything. The government is ruining everything. So show me an example where that doesn't exist, where life is wonderful. I'll show you where it is. It is in the jungle, in the animal world. And you know something? Even in the animal world, there are societal structures that exist. It's not all just craziness, do whatever you want. So that's a lie, okay? That itself is a fraud, and it's ignorance. It's people speaking from pure ignorance. And look, our own Constitution, right? We forget about this a lot, the preamble to our own Constitution, because, you know, we hear people say, well, it's unconstitutional. And the government's getting involved where it shouldn't get involved. And we shouldn't be spending money, and that's unconstitutional, and we're broke, and this and that. But here it is. The framers wrote this down. This is their very words. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice. We have a Justice Department. We have a justice system, as flawed as it is, okay? Ensure domestic tranquility. We have law enforcement, as bad as that is. Provide for the common defense, and boy, do we know that. And it's not even defense anymore. It's provide for the common war. We spend trillions of dollars on that. Promote the general welfare. There it is. What's the general welfare? Creating a society where people have a state of well-being, where they can achieve the things that they want to achieve. That's one of the basic things in the framing of the Constitution. It's right in there. We forget about that part, and I'm not a legal scholar, but I think this has been used as an argument in courts of law, and it has been like kind of thrown out. You can't use that for some reason, but there it is in the Constitution. I'm always amazed at that. Like, we can't spend money as a government to ensure that kids aren't starving and that people have a decent place to live and that our roads and our bridges and our infrastructure are okay and intact, and that we have, you know, we live in this country of unbelievable abundance. And we always talk as if there is lack. There's not lack. There's abundance. There it is. We ignore it. Okay? Promote the general welfare. Here's my friend Warren Moser. I'm going to use his quote, start off with my talk about the financial sector, where he says the financial sector is a lot more trouble than it's worth. And boy, let me tell you something, truer words were never spoken. And Harvey, there is Paul Volcker, not quite exactly the one that you used, but this was from a talk he gave at the Economic Club of New York. I think it was back in 2008, where he said, you know, and this is Paul Volcker, the god of gods of central bankers, right? I have found very little evidence that vast amounts of innovation in financial markets in recent years have had a visible effect on the productivity of the economy. Maybe you could show me that I'm wrong. All I know is that the economy was rising very nicely in the 1950s and 60s without all these innovations. Indeed, it was quite good in the 1980s without credit default swaps and without securitization and without CDOs. And let me show you something, folks. Take a look at this chart, and I'm just going to come around here because I want to show you. This is a chart of GDP, our real gross domestic product, going back to 1950. And this is year-over-year percent change. We had some dips, okay, in the 50s and the 60s, but look at the peaks. All the peaks were higher. And once you got into the 1980s, when this whole, you know, doctrine of deregulation started, look at what happened. We collapsed. Look at what happened with the exponential growth of the financial industry that coincided exactly with that point in time. Collapsed, okay? The explosion in the growth of the size of what benefit did we get? The growth fell off a cliff. And it's still falling off a cliff. So he's absolutely right, Volcker, when he said that. He's shown me the only thing it did is increase the risk in the system. That's it. And enrich